This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, episode 47.
The knowledge is one thing, but the skill to execute is a completely different thing.
Oh, yeah.
And most of that knowledge, like 90%, was absorbed from other people. You know, maybe we learned 10% on our own through trial and error experience, whatever. And that 10% is pretty valuable. But the 90% you learn from other people, well, share it.
This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, a show which answers one question from you, the listener, about CNC router tables, CNC software, hardware, web hosting, and business. I'll help you get started in your CNC hobby or business and help you cut through the confusion.
Today's episode is sponsored by themakersguide.com. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Hello, everyone. This is Bill from CNC Router Tips, and I'm so glad that you could listen into today's show. Today we have one of my personal YouTube heroes on as our special guest. We have John Grimsmo of Grimsmo Knives. Hi, John. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. It's so good to be here.
Now, John, I've been watching your YouTube channel for literally years. And watching the progress that you have had. So, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
We've got a shop just south of Toronto in Canada, and we make very high-end custom pocket knives out of some of the best materials we can find, and we just absolutely love CNC machining and manufacturing, and as much as we can share that on YouTube and Instagram and things like that, we try as hard as we can.
That's fantastic. You say it so nonchalantly. Yeah, we've got a shop now and everything, but you didn't start there. I mean,
no.
When I started watching you, things were on a lot smaller scale. So, how did you first hear about CNC?
The first time, this is a really good question. It's something I've wanted to talk about for a while. Let me think. The first time I heard about CNC machine was when I was living in Washington State. I was super into cars, and I had a friend who was a semi-pro hobby rally car driver. And he had a big auto shop, and he just retired from that and sold it. And he was telling me, like, at these industrial auctions, you can get CNC machines for as low as $5,000, Mm-hmm. And at the time, that was $1 million to me. But that was kind of the first introduction. And then through cars, I was like, well, people make car parts. So I quickly researched, how they're made and all that. So this was probably 2004. Mm-hmm. That I first kind of came online to the CNC scene, and it's been a uphill fun battle ever since.
So you were thinking about car parts back then?
Yeah, I was as much as I'm into manufacturing now, I was into cars back then.
What was your model?
Volvos.
Okay.
Yeah. 1980s Volvo 240s. My mom had one, so it was there, and it cost us almost nothing to keep running. And then I figured out you could modify it, you could add turbos and all kinds of stuff. So we had a lot of fun back then.
So okay, so now you're in business with your brother Eric.
Yep.
And I met Barry, your father-in-law, as well when we stopped off at the shop. We'll get into that later, but when you first got going, you just had some pretty meager equipment. What was the first thing that you bought?
This was in 2008. At the time, we had just moved to Ontario with my wife, or my soon-to-be wife at the time, and we had no money, but I wanted to have my own business. Mm-hmm. I've always been entrepreneurial. I get that from my dad, and so at the time, we borrowed $5,000 from my father-in-law, who you met, mm-hmm. Which at the time was almost $1 million to us. Like, it was just everything. And then I drove down to Grizzly in Pennsylvania, and I bought an X2, a Grizzly X2, which is a tiny $500 manual milling machine, with the intention of converting it to CNC. Because I'd seen YouTube videos. I saw Haas CNC mm-hmm. back in the day, and that was my intention, to make car parts.
Yeah, Haas CNC, that I believe his name is Daniel I'll think of the last name in a second, but he was one of the early pioneers, the first guys that I saw converting stuff to CNC, from scratch, and then telling you how he was doing it.
Yep, and huge inspiration for me. Like, if it wasn't for his videos, maybe I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Although I came to actually build stuff from him much later, in fact, about 3 years ago. But it's quite it's quite something that he was putting out that kind of resource.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and you also got to go to Grizzly in Pennsylvania. I am jealous.
It was like a 7-hour drive. I rented a U-Haul trailer, towed it behind my Volvo, with the intention of buying the mini mill and the small lathe as well, the 10x22 lathe, which was $1,000. And I bought some accessories and some tools and stuff, so I was out of there for probably $2,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. About half your budget.
Yeah, that was huge money to me at the time. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of that $5,000 kind of scurried away pretty quickly into materials and R&D and stuff like that.
Yeah, I did a blog post a few years ago. It was my second CNC machine, and I realized this dirty little secret about buying machine tools, that you spend at least as much on the tooling as you do on the tool. So,
right.
You got to double your budget when you're thinking about these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially in the entry stage. When you can get a manual machine for $500, you're going to spend $2,000 converting it to CNC and tooling it up.
Yeah.
So
easily. And, it's not as hard as it seems or anything, but when we were doing it, or, back in the day, to other people, it appeared like rocket science,
Right.
Because not only did you know what CNC was, but you were building your own, and that was just hard to comprehend. And so I saw a lot of your early videos in YouTube. What year did you start in YouTube?
I think I started YouTube 2006 or 7. Mm-hmm. I had a few car videos I put up, and then around 2008 I was watching so many of those Haas CNC videos, and I bought his conversion kit, and I did that, and then I just needed to do videos as well, because for the past 6-8 years before that, I'd been sharing my car journey on the forums. Mm-hmm. We had this Volvo forum, so anytime I'd do a modification, I'd write a big post about it, put up pictures, and I had this need to share my journey. Mm-hmm. So once I started the CNC conversion and I saw other people sharing the journey, I was like, okay, I gotta share this too, and it's really fun. I don't know why, but at that time, my focus shifted from forums completely into YouTube. And since 2008, I stopped forums almost completely except for research, mm-hmm. and I just interact through YouTube and Instagram now. Yeah,
it was quite something back in the day. I used to listen into or look in on the forums on CNC Zone, which was quite a big influence for me. There were a few others like Practical Machinist and things. What were you doing forum wise then?
The car stuff. There was this forum called Turbo Bricks.
Uh-huh.
That was my home. I mean, I'd spend 15 hours a day on that forum, for many years, just absorbing as much information as I could.
Yeah.
And it's funny now thinking back to times like that. Like I still do that with research. You just cram and want to learn as much as you can about what you love.
Mm-hmm. The funny part is you've probably got enough machinery now that you could build your own turbo. Well, I'm not sure you've got
almost.
fifth axis. Yeah, but it's we're getting ahead of ourselves. So you so you started doing the YouTube videos, and what was your first one about CNC?
It was probably, I think I remember it. I had these stepper motors that I bought, NEMA 23 motors, and I put a piece of tape around it so it's a flag, and I got the, what controller did I have? Motion controller. I can't even remember. Like this stepper CNC, this really crappy one. And but I was able to get the motors to work as like in a pattern.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think, my first video, and I'm sure it's still up there, and it has like 14 views to it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm embarrassed that my first videos on YouTube are just so simple, but people watched them.
Right.
So you put out another one.
Yep.
So now your journey now from getting Haas's conversion kit to making your first CNC. What was the first thing you made with it?
Well, I think I bought his plans, and I actually made the conversion parts, the brackets myself, except for the ball nut attachment that has this big weird thread to it, which I bought from him. But yeah, once I converted the machine to myself and I got it to do, the first big project I made was a cigar ashtray for my dad. And it was a relatively large piece of aluminum, like 5 by 5 by 2 or something like that. And I hollowed it all out completely on the inside, and I did some 3D machining on the top, and it looks horrible now, but at the time it was like, oh my god, this is so cool.
And I bet he loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was half the battle, making something really cool that you couldn't have made by hand easily.
Right.
Yeah. So you got this going. Now I started watching you during that time frame. And even before you started looking at knives, because if I'm not mistaken, you built a grinder as one of your major projects that you showed in the videos.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's about the time frame you were just you just completed the mini mill, and I had one as well, and I was getting ready to convert that, and I didn't do it. I started making the parts. I got 3/4 of the way through the parts, and then I found out about the G0704, which is a larger grizzly.
Yeah,
and that was ended up being the path that I went down. But plus with all the the CNC routers and things. But you guys went off the deep end when it came to knives. What drove all that?
Well, if we're going chronologically, we're jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
So between 2008, when I got the mill, I think I converted it around 2009. I spent a couple of years really struggling to run a car parts business, where I was making custom shifters and strut braces and suspension components for these older Volvos.
On the mini mill.
Yeah, on the mini mill and the lathe, which I converted to CNC. And, I was having a blast at the time. I was loving it, but there was almost zero revenue. If I could make $5,000 to $12,000 in a year, it was a good year.
Yeah.
But that's no money, really, when it comes down to it. My wife worked part-time to support us, and this was before kids or anything. But we were relatively happy. So I was making these car parts. I learned how to do anodizing, aluminum anodizing on my own, just through watching YouTube videos and tutorials online and stuff. So I was anodizing these parts myself, and then just as years went on, between 2009 and 2011, I struggled really hard to come up with any money, really. I really wanted to make this a business and actually bring in cash flow for my family. And that's when I met Sean Casey, who is a local friend of mine, and he sends me an email and he says, so I've got this cool knife that's aluminum handles. Can you anodize a green for me? Green's my color, toxic green. So I'm like, aluminum? Yeah, I could do that. Bring it over. And so he brings over this cool knife. It's a push-button switchblade, kind of not very... I won't finish that sentence, in Canada. But... So he brought it over, we took it apart, we anodized the handles, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And he's like, you got to see some of these custom knives, man. People are getting like $500 to $1,000 for these knives or more, and you have the skills to make them. Now, I was a Boy Scout all my childhood, and I've carried a Swiss Army knife, thanks to MacGyver, since I was 11 years old. I carried it everywhere. I carried it to school. It didn't matter. I was a Boy Scout. You need a knife on you.
Yeah.
So I've had a knife in my pocket forever. I'm 33 now. And I've always known about the custom knife world, but I purposely avoided it because I knew it would cost me a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
it has cost me a lot of money. You were at my shop. Like, it's cost me, $500,000.
Yeah, listeners, he's understating the facts again. This is awesome. Yeah.
But I thought, through that early 2000s, I thought if I got into knives, I'd just be buying knives and collecting knives. I don't know why it never clicked to me that I could make them. Because I guess I thought at the time knives were made in big factories like Spyderco, Benchmade. But I didn't know about the custom knife world really because I didn't dive into it. But man, he told me these stories and about these knife shows, and literally within like that first week, I hardly slept at all because I was just reading on the forums, digesting as much as I could, trying to understand the market, watching YouTube videos.
Too. Oh my goodness, yeah. You take the deep dive and then you go and you do an entire education on YouTube, online, or whatever in a very short period of time. You can learn a new skill. That's what's unique about this age and time right now. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I love doing that. I still do that now, not to the breadth of knowledge so quickly that I was able to do in the past, because I've got 2 kids now, responsibilities, a business to run. But still, if I need to learn something, I know it's there. Anything, whether it's business or relationship or, how to make this, how to do anodizing, it's all out there.
Yeah.
So, I took that deep dive and I, within a day or two, I had this conversation with my wife. Like, I think I know what I need to do now. She's seen me struggle for so long. She's been supporting us on a part-time salary. And so she kind of tentatively said, well, if you think so, like, all right.
Take that woman out to dinner tonight, man. She's a gem because it is a rare woman who supports her husband's dream and says, go for it. So, be very appreciative of that.
I am, absolutely. And it's in 2 days, it's our 15-year anniversary of the day we met. So it's, we've got a date coming up for sure.
Definitely.
I owe her a lot. So 2 months later, I was on a plane to Las Vegas to the USN Knife Show gathering. First time I'd ever been to Vegas. I had maximum $800 for this whole trip. Flights, food, hotel, everything. So I stayed in the cheapest hotel I could find. I walked like 45 minutes to the event because it was so far away, but it was mind-blowing because I immersed myself in the industry. I met all the makers. I was standing next to this guy for like 20 minutes until I realized who it was. And then I'm like, oh, you're Brad Southard. It's this famous knife maker at the time, and now we're best friends.
Yeah.
Now we text each other on a semi-daily basis.
I love that. I think, getting to a live event and meeting the actual people will so increase your level of participation, your recognition, and your motivation that it's just worth it. Yep.
Yeah. And your passion for the subject. It's hard not to be passionate when you're around other passionate people.
Yeah.
Like when you came over last week and we met for the first time, like we had such a great time.
Oh,
we were
it
just
was fantastic.
Kind of giddy the whole time.
Yeah.
Like,
Ooh, he gets it. And it's like, I can't explain it, but it when it's happening. And that was just awesome. And thank you again for having us over. That was awesome.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, whatever it is about it, it just feels right. And that's where you're supposed to be.
Yep.
So at this knife show, I mean, not only do you get to see other people's product, and you get this, seeing pictures online is one thing, but a knife is a very tactile, in your hands, especially this custom world. You got to feel it, you got to see it, you got to experience it, and you got to rub elbows with as many people as you can. It was just crazy.
I got to admit to something. So we're at your shop, and you have all these knives in various stages of assembly, and each one is unique. They're meticulously made and so high quality and everything. And I would not hold it in my hand for more than 10 seconds at a time. Eric handed me one that he was working on, that he was assembling, and I opened the blade, and then I collapsed the blade, and I put it down. And there's a reason for that, because in that 10 seconds, I've been wanting a knife so bad, and it's just not the time right now.
Yeah, I get that.
So I was like, it's like being in the candy store and not having a piece of candy.
Right. That's a lot of willpower there.
Yeah. So anyway, they're really great knives. You guys should see them. If you want to check them out, what is your website? It's grimsmoknives.com.
Yeah, grimsmoknives.com.
And Grimsmo is spelled GRIMSMO.
Correct.
.com. Okay. Shameless plug. Go ahead.
No, please. Yeah, so I mean, coming home from that knife show, mind blown. At the time, so I spent the past 2 months before that, I was making custom handles for a specific knife, a Spyderco Mannix. Because it was this knife that had replaceable handles. So I was like, well, let's make aluminum handles. Let's anodize them green. They'll sell well. And they sold pretty well. I probably sold 100 sets or something like that eventually at, I don't even remember if I charged like $60 or $100 for them or something. And I could do fancy engravings. I could put people's name on it, and people started to really like that. So at the show, I brought 3 or 4 sets or something, and I said on the forum about this meetup, and I was like, okay, first person to come up to me, and I put a picture of myself. First person to come up to me and says, hey, John, how's it going? I'll give you a free set of handles. So it encouraged people to come to me because I put up my picture. So everybody, nobody really knows people's faces at these shows. They just know screen names and handles and stuff. So I was like one of the guys that put up a picture of themselves. And yeah, it drew people to me, which was great.
That's great. That's a pretty bold step, actually.
Yeah. But at the time, I had a little bit of YouTube traction. From 2007 to 2011, which is the time we're talking about now, I had like 50 subscribers. And that was just my friends, family, car buddies, things like that. And then once I started to get into the CNC stuff and the knife stuff, it started to creep up and up and up. And at the time of this show, I don't know, it might have been a few hundred people, but that was a huge step up from the 50, organic growth.
Yeah. So now, how has that been as far as the growth? I know that we're kind of off track here for a second, but what was that like? You have a fairly large following now. How many subscribers do you have?
On YouTube, it's roughly 45,000.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen overnight. What was that like growth-wise?
Well, I remember talking to my mother-in-law, my wife's mom, about this. Every now and then we check in, and she's like, "How are things going?" And what are you up to? And well, we're doing this YouTube thing. We've got 62 subscribers, and then it was 75, and then however long later it was, we just hit 100. That was crazy.
Yeah.
And then eventually that was 1,000. Holy crap, that was 1,000. And having these check-in points with somebody outside your industry, like your mother-in-law, really brings it together, because as you see it, as you sit there, it's like incremental and you don't really see each check-in point.
Yeah.
But having these milestones to tell somebody periodically, it's pretty interesting. So I remember 100 clearly. Because that was from no growth to all of a sudden we got these extra 50. Where'd they come from?
Yeah.
Just putting out content, sharing your passion. So 50 or 100 was big, 1,000 was big, 5,000, 10,000, and then it's just organic from there, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, we have a private Facebook group, and watching the growth of that thing has been just mind-blowing. It's a little under 2 years now, and we're at we just passed 6,000 members this weekend.
Fantastic.
And I remember how long it took to get to 100 members.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, is there anybody out there? And then, boom, 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 starts going. So, and YouTube is so much more of a visual medium that I meant, the growth there can be like exponential almost.
Right.
That's a great feeling.
But the key of that exponential curve is that almost everybody gives up when it flatlines in the first however long it is. For me, it was years. Yeah. Could be months. Depends on how hard you push it, right? But that first, it's going to be flatline, and then you get +1, and then it's flatline, then +2, and then you got to stick with it if you really want to make it a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's hard hard to do. Like, why am I doing this? This is taking a lot of time. This is, is anybody actually watching these things?
Yeah.
And, and then you meet somebody and they say, wow, your video on whatever, really helped me out when I was looking for it. Nobody else had that information. And, there you were and you walked me through it.
Yep.
That's what I get from you. That's, and I hope that that's what I get back to, others when I do a video or a podcast or whatever. It's all about sharing the knowledge, because if I take it to my grave, what good is it?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Inspire somebody else maybe.
Yeah. I mean, something that I've been thinking, I probably told you last week and you were here, but like, the knowledge is one thing, but the skill to execute is a completely different thing.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you and I are the kind of people that will just dive bomb into the research of it and learn everything about everything that we possibly can. Mm-hmm. And most of that knowledge, like 90%, was absorbed from other people. Maybe we learned 10% on our own through trial and error experience, whatever. And that 10% is pretty valuable. But the 90% you learn from other people, well, share it. Like, just get it out there, because something I found out through this whole YouTube process is that the more you share, the more of an expert you become.
Yeah.
And then people look up to you as the source of information. And it helps your customer base, and it helps your peers.
Yeah.
And it helps elevate you to a status of just being a smart, helpful, caring guy, which helps every aspect of business completely.
Yeah. And it's funny. They say a tide rises all ships, and that is true. When I meet a John Grimsmo, when I meet Jesse Hewson or somebody that is just out there giving and sharing, what it is that they're doing, they become known to the people that I associate with, because I put up pictures and say, "Hey, I met John Grimsmo." That may mean nothing to them initially, okay? Because they might not have heard of you, or they might not have heard of Jesse, or they might not have heard of me, whatever. But when they get in and look, now they say, "Wait, what's Bill going crazy about?" And then they get out and they're, "Oh my God, look at these knives!" And next thing you know, now they're like, "Wow, I get, that you're so lucky." I had one guy tell me he was jealous. I posted a picture of us from the lunch.
Yeah.
In Facebook, he says, "Now I officially hate you, Bill." He says, "Wow, that is so cool. I wanted to meet John and everything." And it's just serendipity, really, that I got to meet you, other than the fact that I've been kind of stalking you secretly, but in a good way. I says, "Yeah, gotta meet John. But it was really so cool to finally do that, and to get to meet both you and Eric there, and at your shop, no less. Yep. This place is awesome. So I know that there's a lot. Now we're at the point now where you've started making knives, but you haven't made your own yet.
Correct. We were making the handles. This was late 2011. Coming back from the knife show, I was like, I got to make a knife. This is crazy. I'm so obsessed. And the deeper I dug, the harder it became. To accept the challenge technically, because I wanted to make it so perfect, so elite. I wanted to make it better than everything else I just saw at that knife show, in my own way.
Yeah.
And now I see there's many different levels to excellence when it comes to knives or anything. Some people are more artistic and they go into these crazy, beautiful, like artistic patterns. I'm not super artistic from a drawing standpoint. Some people have these knife journals that they just draw new knives every single day, and I don't have that skill. I can put it into CAD, I can make tool paths, and I can do all that. So that's where I apply my beauty to. Mm-hmm. And precision and fit and finish and attention to detail have to be my key points. So I've been focusing on that. So our flagship knife is called the Norseman, and I designed that just after that knife show around November 2011. And that was Knife Making Tuesday week 1, which was our big YouTube series. The first episode was just kind of me at my computer designing these 4 different blades, and then I went to my mini mill and I machined them, and they were like 1 inch long. like tiny little micro test blades. I just wanted to see which of the 4 designs, I wanted to feel them in my hand, see which one I like the most. And yeah, so I made the 4, and I chose the weirdest one because nobody else was making something quite like that. And then went ahead with it, made a full-size version over the next few months, and went to a Toronto knife show in early 2012 and kind of showed around the little prototype that we made and got some really good feedback. Got some people that said they would buy one on the spot when I have them. So that was a huge boost in ego and help you know that you're on the right track. And every week I'd be putting up these YouTube videos about the process of, today we're figuring out how to make the lock work properly and not stick and do what it's supposed to do.
That's what I liked about your videos. You were figuring it out live, and you weren't shielding us from your mistakes, which is fantastic because we learned so much from, don't do it that way, but do it this way. Yeah. That was awesome. Yeah.
Learn from my mistakes. And if I broke an end mill, thankfully I got it on film, and I'd put it up and I'd talk about it. I'd be like, I'm not afraid to share my failures because they can educate. And I'd get so many comments from people. I mean, I think that was one of my key points of success, was sharing the mistakes, and everybody else was like, oh, I've been there, or I'm glad you told me that so that I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
Or the people that are never going to do it, they're just enjoying the process. Like, it's just fun to watch.
Yeah. You still have the first Norseman?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't get to see that when I was
okay.
But yeah. But anyway, so you started the process with the Norseman. Please continue.
Yeah. And then, so through 2012, we were working on this first knife, and we had, I might as well tell the story.
Yeah.
The Tormac story.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Maker's Guide, creator of the Triple Edge Finder. Get the edge you need, save time and frustration on your CNC project, and make setup a snap. Save time and material. Set up your workpiece on your CNC router table faster than ever. Accurately set your Z-axis height first time, every time. Automatically locate the corner or edge of a workpiece. Reset your starting point in the middle of a program. Quality crafted right here in the USA on US-made CNC machines. Get the edge you need today. Go to www.themakersguide.com/edge. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
We were working on this first knife, and we had, I might as well tell the story.
Yeah.
The Tormac story. Let me think here. I got this random comment on my YouTube page, not on the comment section, but on the page somehow. Andy at Tormac.com sent me a message that said, love your videos, we should chat. And at the time, I had this mini mill, and a Tormac was holy grail of a machine, $10,000 or so. And getting an email from them saying we should talk was just mind-blowing. Like, I didn't know what to say for the next hour because I was just kind of trembling. Like, what does that mean? I was talking with my wife. What does he what could he possibly? Oh, could be this, could be that. I don't know. I guess I have to call him.
Yeah.
So I've typically been a very shy, nervous person for most of my life. Don't really like talking on the phone. The YouTube experience has certainly calmed me down so that we can have this interview and I'm not freaking out. But, about to call Andy, I'm sitting there pacing around my bedroom for an hour with the phone in my hand, not dialing.
Yeah, and you don't want to seem anxious, but you're so excited,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, it's kind of funny thinking back on that. But, hey, that's the truth. That was the time. So I called him up. We talked for like an hour, and they wanted to sponsor the YouTube channel, and they wanted to find a way to get us a machine in a mutually beneficial way to both of us. And so we came up with a plan, and a month later, I had a machine delivered to my door. Yeah. And it was like, I'd never thought this would be possible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It was the YouTube content that made that deal possible. Yeah. Otherwise, they're never going to call up some random person on the street because they don't know that person. And I mean, at the time I don't remember how many followers, but let's call it under 1,000. I had some traction, but nothing big. but they saw me early on.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. So I documented a lot of that process. I documented getting the machine on video, installing it, making the first part.
I remember you guys pulling out coffee mugs and black T-shirts and
all the swag they threw in for us.
Yeah, it was really great. Yeah.
It was a fantastic time, and so we got the machine. Let's say late April, early May, and the big knife show, the biggest knife show in the world, the Blade Show, was, let's call it June 1st. Mm-hmm. So we had this machine, and we had 1 month to bring some knives to the show. So we had this goal: we're going to bring 24 knives to the show, which was audacious. But those are the kind of big pie in the sky dreams you got to have. So I mean, we had to program it. We had to figure out how to make fixtures. We had to design these parts. We'd only made one so far on the mini mill. So yeah, the goal was to make 24 parts. I forget how many we actually ended up making, like parts wise, but we probably made maybe a dozen handles, blades, things like that. And then it got crunch time, and we're like a couple days before, we're like, we're only going to be able to finish 2 knives, maybe. So Eric and I literally stayed up all night the night before we were going to leave. And we worked in the garage. We had no heat in the garage at the time. Mm-hmm. It was May, so it wasn't cold, but it was chilly.
Yeah.
But throughout the winter, I mean, there was no heat in the garage. We were out there wearing toques and watching our breath the whole time.
Kind of like me right now, yeah.
Yeah. And so we stayed up all night. We used the Tormac as a lathe to make spacers for the knives, threaded spacers. So we put the material in the spindle, put a lathe tool in there, program it. I'm not sure why I didn't just use the lathe. But that was the 4 a.m. deliriousness of trying to figure it out. So we had these 2 knives, which are now Norseman number 1 and number 2, mine and Eric's, that we just finished up in order to make pretty for the show and brought them to the show. We had a table at the show. It was a $500 booth. Mm-hmm. And we sat there and waited for people to come by. And didn't know what to expect. It's the biggest knife show in the world. The one I went to at Vegas was tiny compared to this. It's a tenth of the size. Mm-hmm. So we had a decent amount, like a small amount of people stop by the table, and several people who knew us from the channel. Mm-hmm. Eric was in the bathroom, and he got recognized washing his hands. So that was cool. And it's a big fun gathering of all your peers and stuff. So I knew people in the industry, both customers and other makers, that we got to hang out with, and it was an amazing experience. I think we took several pre-orders at the time for our Norseman knife, so that was fantastic, and it certainly helped cement our traction. Interacting and meeting potential customers is a huge key point to especially our business.
Yeah, definitely. So now you're sitting there in this booth at your first trade show, really. There's a lot to learn from that. I used to do model airplanes, and I had a booth at the Toledo show, which is the big show of the year for that. But you have absolutely no idea what is going to come from each trade show. It's kind of a lot of pressure there, because if you got it right, you're swamped. You never get to take a breath, and all your inventory is gone in like the first day or two.
Right.
If you get it wrong, it's a lonely time.
Yep.
What was this like?
It was fairly lonely. It's a 3-day show, so there was a lot of sitting in our booth waiting for people to come by. And Eric had done a couple trade shows in his previous world. So, one of the tricks was you stand in front of your table, so you're not just hiding behind your table. You interact with everybody walking by. We used to shove knives in people's hands, just like, here, check this out,
Kind of like the Chinese food in the mall?
Yeah. Exactly. All this stuff. You do everything you can just to gain awareness, right?
Yeah.
Just to not be bored, basically. And, of course, we got to walk around and see other people and interact with things like that. But, I mean, even at the time, one of the edges that we had were some people knew about us already through YouTube.
Yeah.
We had a small traction already forming, so we'd have some people come by or stop us in the aisles or whatever, and very few people at the show had that at the time. So we already knew we were onto something a little bit, and we needed to pursue it, even though the show, it generated a few sales, sure, but it was nothing groundbreaking. But all those little things put together, really added up to it making it a fantastic show.
Yeah. Yeah, and, having the courage to stick through it, to first off, having the gumption to get it together to go to this show, let alone, sitting through it and displaying your stuff and trying to figure out what you're doing there. What's the general etiquette here,
Yep.
That takes a kind of a entrepreneurial spirit, an adventure spirit, and that's it's getting rare. You got to put yourself out there to get into position to receive what is coming.
Yes, exactly. That's very well said. And as much of an introvert as I am, typically, you have to put yourself out there to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. So you're on your way back from the show, and what are you talking about in the car?
Well, my dad and brother and I, we drove down from Toronto to Atlanta, Georgia. It's an 18-hour drive. So we do it with one night's stay over, and it was a fantastic kind of bonding experience for the three of us, too. My dad just got a new Challenger car, so it was a lot of fun, and we just had a blast. So, the whole time we're talking back and forth. I think we slept on the way down, but that's a good question. What are we talking about? We're talking about the potential. My dad was there. He saw the show.
Yeah.
He's got a fairly close pulse on our business, and we're talking about the potential of what's next, what's going to happen, what's possible. This was our first show. What could it be better next year? What could we do? How would our booth look? How many knives should we bring? Et cetera, et cetera.
So you got back and you started doing a video report of that, as I recall, on your YouTube channel. You talked about the show afterwards.
Yep.
Did you see growth from the YouTube from that?
From the YouTube of having to go to the show?
Talking about the show and, getting more awareness out of that?
A little bit. Nothing measurable, I don't think. But, the people that see that YouTube video that didn't get to go to the show, they see your growth. They see, oh, you got to go to the show. Oh, you got a table. You're becoming a big deal. You're really hustling. You're really pushing for it.
Yeah.
You're not just sitting at home expecting money to come into the door.
Yeah.
And it's that perception of, not only putting in the work, but kind of showing that you're putting in the work. Because if you work 15 hours a day, but nobody knows about it, and you don't have much to show for it, then what good is it?
Exactly.
Not to brag, not to paint yourself as a big fancy thing, but customers kind of have to know what you're up to. Otherwise, they don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really tough to manage, too, when you're introverted. I'm introverted. I don't know if people who listen to my podcast or see my videos or whatever get that. But, this was a big step for me to start talking to people, through the podcast and through this was huge because I could go for days without saying anything to anybody.
Yep.
It's just the way I was, unless it was somebody who is on my wavelength about my subject that I'm passionate about, and then you can't shut me up.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of my outlet for that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's 2 points I want to make. One is, now that I've got kids, I went to a birthday party yesterday and sitting around with all the other parents, don't know what to talk about. We're just talking about our kids, and that's kind of boring to me. I love my kids, but, just talking about surface conversation is boring. I want to go deep with somebody because it's fun.
Yeah. So
I want to talk. I'm trying to figure out these questions to ask people. And one of them is, what are you passionate about? Because that gets them talking. That brings out the truth. But another point I wanted to make that you mentioned is the key turning point for my YouTube career was when I went from filming what was in front of me to turning the camera around and being a person.
Yes.
Because when all you see is hands, there's only so much interaction. The people don't care that much unless they love exactly what you're showing. But the second you turn it around, you show your face, and you're like, "Hi, I'm John Grimsmo. This is super weird, but I'm going to talk to this camera." You're in there. You're in the garage. You're comfortable. You can picture whatever you want behind that camera. I just pictured a camera and myself watching it later.
Yeah.
You don't picture the hundreds or thousands of people that end up watching it, and then as time goes on, as I got more comfortable, I'd picture like one ideal person behind that camera. Nobody in particular, just like, my happy customer who's watching this video. So I'm talking to him about what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, it comes across on your videos very, very clear that, when you're on camera, you're actually talking to us. And that is, that's very much appreciated. And you're telling us what's on your mind. You did this. Now I'm jumping out of sequence, but that's okay because this is my show. We can jump anywhere we want in time.
You bet.
But you were doing a series that I love, and it was called was it Daily Grind?
The Grimsmo Grind.
Grimsmo Grind. That's it. And you were just talking about the thought process of what was going on in your mind as you're building this business and, what you're reading, what you're working on. And to me, that was very valuable because it gave me hope and, letting me know that I'm not weird and that, I am weird, but in other ways, okay. but that it's okay when you're focused on building or creating something to be weird in that way and to think about things that most people take for granted. So that was very helpful. I love the knife videos, and that's what got me hooked on the first part. But hearing those conversations that you were having in your car on the way to to the shop or whatever, that made you more real to me. And I want to thank you for putting those out first off. But
excellent.
Now let's go back in time.
Yeah,
where we were before.
Jump in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah,
and. So as we're growing this business, we're starting to make knives. We'd try to figure out, well, is it better to batch products, to make 50 handles at a time and then to make 50 blades, and then you realize they don't fit together. Mm-hmm. So you've got, problems. Now you've got 50 problems to fix. So it's always been a challenge to figure out and to constantly R&D the product. Like, there's never been a solid iteration. It always changes. It's always fluid. It always gets better and better. And one of the key points that I'd started on the knives since day one was putting the date on it. We got CNC. What's a big deal to engrave a couple words on it? It's no big deal, right? So I started putting the month and the year on every single thing that I made, and the serial number, knife number 1, knife number 2, knife number 3. And something that didn't occur to me until much later was that putting a date and a number on a product gave it a soul. It made it a 1 of 1. This is number 461, and there's only one 461. Even if 320 is the same color, same pattern, looks exactly the same, it's a different knife. It's got a different name. And now the customers are, buying, selling, trading these knives, and they can say, "Oh, I used to own that one because I remember that number." It's not just this 1 of 500 lot that is not personal. So that's one of those like whimsical things that just happened because I wanted to keep track of it for my own purposes.
Yeah, and it is very cool. You've got a serial number, just like a gun or many works of art and things like that are they're serialized. They're part of an actual collection and production. Like
right.
Stradivarius, when that violin was made, et cetera. Kind of the same thing with your knives. That's kind of cool. People,
And a small difference being it's not this like long, complicated serial number that only makes sense to a robot. It says number sign 001.
Yeah.
So it's number 1. It's not 42567
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very cool. So you built a lot of Norseman knives. When did you decide to start with the Rask? That's a new thing.
We have built today we're almost at number 600 Norseman. The Rask started about 2 years ago now, in concept, I think. Yeah. We wanted to make a knife that was hypothetically easier to make in certain ways. We wanted to make a knife that was a bit more appealing to the masses, a little bit more conventional blade shape, a little bit different handle design, a little bit smaller, things of that nature. And in the end, it ended up being more complicated and way more time consuming. But, such is life. But we felt it was time to come out with a second model. So Eric got a sketchbook, and I put him on the design process, and he drew up like 10 or 15 different models, and between the two of us, we picked out the one we liked the best, and it became this one, and he came up with the name called the Rask, R-A-S-K, which is a Norwegian word for quick or fast, which my wife teased me the other day. She goes, well, the production process has not exactly been quick or fast, but but yeah, it's one of those things.
Just that little dose of reality.
Yep. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so over the past few years, it's just been a constant growth process. The knives get better and better and better with every iteration. We're constantly pushing ourselves, constantly learning new things, bringing more and more processes in-house, which has been fantastic. And the more we make, the more growth we have. We ran 500 plus knives on the Tormac before we started to get so picky that tolerances became not good enough. For some reason, they were good enough for 500 knives, but now I've learned how to measure in tenths, not thousandths, and all of a sudden the knives aren't quite good enough to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had a very, what was it, about a 4 or 5 year relationship with Tormac?
Yep.
And, very, very good for the Tormac brand and very good for your brand. You guys doing a lot of stuff with their equipment. You kind of became synonymous. You're a poster boy for Tormac there.
Right. And that was kind of the goal from the beginning, I think. And certainly Andy's hope at Tormac was to do that. And I feel like we did a really good job with it. And we had a lot of fun. And I know they sold a lot of machines with my name attached to it, which was fantastic. It's good advertising for both of us. So it worked very well, and we had a lot of fun. Part of the fun was pushing that machine to its max, was, tightening up the screws to make it less backlash and figuring out how fast we could run it and how many parts we could make. And I had a lot of fun figuring out how to run it unattended. So one of the projects I had, one of these little late night crazy ideas was, well, I've got these bigger pallets and I want the machine to run, but if it breaks a tool, I want it to stop so that it doesn't keep running and ruin all the other tools. Because I had the automatic tool changer with 10 tools on it. And so I came up with this. What did I do? I at least wanted to know when the run was done so that I can go out and put a new run and I could be inside playing with my kids or whatever. So I hooked up another limit switch at the top of the Z-Travel that at just before the M30, it would go up and touch and stop at this limit switch, which activated a Twine module, which would send me an email basically when it was done. So I think I got that working pretty good. And then I'd have like a 2-hour run or something, and then I'd get an email and be like, oh, time to go out, change the pallet, hit go again, make more parts.
Now, this is kind of cool. You're out there and you're in heavy production with the Tormac.
I guess I should clarify. This is at our garage, our 2-car garage at home.
That's where I was going.
I don't think I've mentioned that yet.
Yeah.
2-car garage in our house, stuffed full of, we had 3 CNC machines, Tormac mill, Tormac lathe, and a Tormac surface grinder, and table, bunch of stuff. It was tight quarters. So go ahead. Yeah,
that's exactly where I was going with this. I mean, you were doing all of this out of your garage, and I remember that the day that you guys moved your machines in and everything, with the pallets and on the YouTube videos, because I'm watching,
Yeah.
you guys doing this and, getting it all set up takes longer to put together than you initially think.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of detail there. But so you guys worked out of that garage for a year and a half or 2 years?
That we worked in the garage?
Yeah.
Well, I was in that garage from 2007 to 2015.
Oh, okay. So longer than I thought. But the growth that you guys had enabled you to take your next step building wise, which is
correct. So this is mid 2015. We've had huge success with the Norseman. He's just holding off his sneeze there.
Sorry. Well, thank you. Go ahead. So it's
so mid 2015, tremendous growth with the Norseman. We can't make enough of them. We've got demand. We're turning customers away, which hurts, but it's also kind of good thing for the brand. Supply and demand is a huge issue for us. And we can only take the Tormac so far before we realize if we want to increase production a lot, we need a bigger, faster machine that can make better quality parts with less defects and less finishing work too. So that's when I started to really research big machines.
Yeah.
And 2015 was a very interesting year for me.
I hope you've been enjoying this interview with John Grimsmo of Grimsmo Knives. Make sure you tune into part 2 to find out why 2015 was such a great year for Grimsmo Knives and how John radically increased his business. And you can get access to the second part of this interview and other episodes at CNCRoutertips.com, where we help you cut through the confusion on how to build your CNC router business. I often mention many different types of software during the episodes and hardware and cutters, and it can get a little confusing. So what I did was I put together a page on my website, cncroutertips.com/resources. And on that page, I list all sorts of resources there, from books to tools to software, all the things that I use that make my CNC experience better and easier. And I hope you'll check it out. So again, it's cncroutertips.com/resources. Now, if you'd like to have your question featured on the air, here's how. Need help? Ask me about your CNC router question on my podcast, the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'll be glad to help or try and get you the help you need. I want this podcast to be a fun and personal experience for everyone and helpful. So let's keep it real and ask sensible questions. Please use common sense and show courtesy to everyone. That way everybody wins. Here are some guidelines to ensure that your question is qualified to be featured on the show. Please keep your questions under 1 minute in length. If it goes a little over that, that's fine, but don't ramble. If you have a website and URL, you're allowed to share it, but only once during the recording. Spammy or disrespectful or deeply private questions will not be considered for the podcast. If you need to ask more than one question, just make each question a separate voicemail. Okay, fantastic talking to you again. I'm Bill Griggs for CNC Router Tips. I hope you have a great day.